What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Your favorite TV star Peppa Pig here to drop What If Deku Had Every Quirk. I know clicking on this you're probably like, wow, another OP Deku, but not quite. This Deku will have a random quirk every day, like a sort of roulette of quirks, so it's going to be a blast making this series, and I hope you guys leave a ton of likes on this one, because I would genuinely be depressed if I have to stop making this series. That said though, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We start our story off in the perspective of Izuku when he's 4 years old. Now Deku would be in the back of the classroom working on a little arts and crafts project, and Bakugo would have already discovered his quirk about 2 weeks ago. While Izuku was working on this project, he goes over towards the glue, and when he starts pouring it, he realizes that his hand, it literally starts dripping glue off of it. So Izuku goes over towards the sink, starts trying to wipe it off when he realizes the glue just doesn't stop. Suddenly he takes his hand out and his hand goes back to normal, and then one of the teachers goes up to him and is like, "Izuku, are you okay?" And Izuku's like, "I'm fine," holding his hand out and shooting glue at her face. She would say, "Oh, looks like your quirk manifested, Izuku," and she'd be like, "Don't worry, it's okay, we'll call your mom." Bakugo and everybody else would be looking, and Bakugo would say, "Wait, Deku, what's your quirk?" And Deku would say, "I don't know, but I'll tell you guys later." And Bakugo would realize that every time that Deku takes a step, little pieces of glue would come off of him. Once Izuku would get picked up by Inko, he would leave his entire seat just full of glue. And once Izuku makes his way towards the quirk doctor, the doctor would be like, "Hey, looks like you have a quirk, kid. Even though you have that weird joint in your toe, you were born with a quirk. You're kind of an odd case. You should be glad that you were born with a quirk." Izuku would smile, and the next day at school, he'd be ready to tell everybody, "Hey, you know, I have a glue quirk," you know what I mean? But what pretty much ends up happening is that once Izuku gets home and he goes to sleep and he's so happy that he got a quirk and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna use my quirk this way, this way, this way," you know what I mean? He wakes up the next day and he would be like so ready to tell everybody, but in the morning when Inko would put him in the car, she'd be like, "Izuku, why do you have wings on your back?" And she'd be like, "Did you create those out of glue or something?" And Deku would say, maybe," as he would be dropped off, and once he's there, he would tell everybody that his quirk is glue human. He can turn into glue and physical attacks don't really hurt him. And then Bakugo would be like, "You're lying, Deku. I mean, look behind you. You have wings. You clearly have some sort of flying quirk." And Deku would be like, "No, I don't." He'd be like, "Look." And he'd try to shoot glue out of his hands, but he realizes that he genuinely can't. Suddenly, Izuku would flap his wings and he would start floating above the air, and everybody would be watching as Izuku's flying in the middle of the classroom. Bakugo would be like, "Show off," but he'd have a smirk on his face, thinking to himself that that's exactly what he would do if he had a wing quirk. And he would tell Izuku that his quirk is awesome. He has some sort of wing quirk. Deku would say, "I'm serious, guys. Yesterday it was different. I'm gonna have my mom take me to the quirk doctor." The same, like 30 minutes later, Inko picks up Izuku, and then Izuku would be at the quirk doctor as he would be told that he has a wing quirk, and it's very strange considering that yesterday he had a glue quirk. They would tell him to come back the next day and that the doctor has some sort of theory on what this could actually be. He would wake up the next day with a quirk that lets him charge anything with a touch, even a car battery, and yes, I got that idea from RDC World 1. If you guys have seen that video, like if you were in My Hero. But anyways, Izuku wakes up with a quirk that essentially allows him to touch a phone and charge it. And the way he would find this out is that on his way towards the quirk doctor first thing in the morning, Izuku grabs onto Inko's phone, which would actually almost be dead, and then it would go to 100%. And Inko would be like, "Whoa, Izuku, did you just charge my phone?" And Deku would be like, I guess I did." Suddenly their car breaks down on the side of the road and she'd be like, "The battery's dead." Deku's like, "Is that the battery?" And he touches it, and then suddenly it would be completely charged. Inko would be like, "Oh, you charged it." And then Izuku would get back in the car, make his way towards the quirk doctor, and the doctor would have Izuku charge his phone. He'd be like, "Thanks, young man." He then goes on to go towards this like whiteboard and like with like chalk and stuff, and he says, "Okay, this is most people. They always have one quirk and it's constant. But this is Izuku, and he ends up pretty much showing them a physical demonstration of what Izuku's body is like and how it's weird that Izuku's gonna be waking up with different quirks every single day. Izuku would ask the quirk doctor if that's a good or bad thing, and the doctor would say that it's kind of a good and a bad thing, considering that Izuku will be the random hero, and one day he might have a powerful quirk and the next day he might have like the weakest quirk ever. He would have a good laugh at this, and he would tell Izuku that it's probably in his best interest to become a hero. He'd probably become really famous having a quirk like that, and Izuku would have a big bright smile on his face knowing that even the doctor believes in him, so he's now super happy, and he gets dropped off at school only to tell everybody that apparently he has a random quirk every day. And Bakugo would be like, oh, that's interesting, with, you know, Deku being like, yeah, but I'm not so sure how I'm gonna be a hero because one day I might have a really strong quirk and one day I might not have a powerful quirk at all. How will I even help people? Bakugo would be like, that's easy, Deku. All you have to do is train your body so that you can be strong regardless of what quirk you have. And Deku would think, he'd be like, you're right. From here, Deku dabs up Bakugo and Bakugo would say, don't worry Deku, me and your quirks will be sure to become heroes someday. And from here would start an amazing friendship between Bakugo and Deku, where Bakugo and Deku actually become friends because this time Bakugo doesn't think of Izuku as lesser than him, and instead he thinks that Izuku has one of the most funny and like fantastic quirks that you could possibly get. I mean, having the ability of having a different quirk every day sounds like the most fun thing in the world, and it is. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't trade that for the world. But anyways, we have a little bit of a time skip, and we would find ourselves on the day of the sludge villain incident. And for years on end, Izuku would have random quirks every day, but would train with Bakugo on days that he could train, and other days he couldn't because of his quirks wouldn't allow him to live a normal life. Some days he'd have quirks that would make him completely unable to function like a normal human. So some days he couldn't even train with Bakugo, but most of the time, he'd be fine. And he would find his quirk to be a blessing and a curse, considering some days, like I said, he'd be really powerful, and others, not so much. But eventually, like I said, we get to the day of the sludge villain attack, and Deku and Bakugo would both be announced as future heroes by the teacher. He goes on and tells everybody about the quirk aptitude test, and Bakugo and Deku would both stand up on their desks and be like, we're gonna become heroes, you know? And, you know, the classes are cheering and agreeing, you know, they have no, like, malice towards them. They're like, yeah, you guys really will. And, you know, people would have already been telling Deku that someday soon he should be the random hero. Random or randos or something like that. I don't know. Think of a name, guys. Comment it down below and I'll pin the best one or something like that. But anyways, Deku would do that, and on his way home, Deku would realize, oh crap, I'm late, it's my mom's birthday. So he ends up taking a different path home, and this is when he would get attacked by the sludge villain. However, when the sludge villain comes out of the sewer, Deku, being a lot faster and a lot stronger than the normal human being superhuman level already, would jump up into the air and begin jumping over and over and over and over again, the sludge villain being like, kid, give me your body, I need it, I didn't know that freak was in town. And Deku would say, no way, as you know, he's up in the air and the sludge villain tries to grab at him, but Deku just gets higher and higher, so high. And then All Might comes in out of nowhere from the sewer and throws a Texas smash, absolutely splattering the villain everywhere. And Deku jumps down onto the ground with All Might being like, kid, where'd you come from? And Deku would say, oh, I was here the whole time. That thing tried to attack me, so I had to use one of my quirks to get away. And All Might would be like, one of your quirks? And Deku would say, don't worry about it, before he then helps All Might bottle up the sludge villain, and he would ask All Might for an autograph. All Might thinks it's weird that that kid said one of my quirks, and he wouldn't really question. He'd just be like, whatever. Ultimately, taking the sludge villain to the police station, and Izuku would make his way home and celebrate his mother's birthday. This is when Izuku would go to sleep early, and he decides that tomorrow, hopefully he'll have a good quirk. Imagine going to sleep and knowing that tomorrow your day is going to be so much different than it is today. It's so funny. But the next day at school, when Izuku walks in, Bakugo would be like, huh, what's new today? And Deku would show him the useless quirk that he spawned with today. He would laugh, and they would train after school like usual for 10 months. Deku trains in martial arts and stuff like that, and whenever he has strong quirks, he and Bakugo would spar. They fight it out, and most of the time Bakugo would end up not coming out on top, but because of the fact that Bakugo is pretty much fighting a new villain every single day, Bakugo would be at bare minimum pro hero levels. Deku and Bakugo would have become like the bestest of friends, and their combination attacks are so absolutely lethal they could probably even take out a Prime All Might by themselves. While Deku is OP in his own right, he's basically superhuman level by himself, and by the end of these 10 months of training, Izuku would be way powerful. Not only that, but Deku having the ability to control so many quirks during his lifetime would give him a keen understanding of how to face off against different people with different quirks. Knowing that he has the ability of most of the people which he's probably going to fight someday, he knows exactly what the weaknesses are and how to handle them. People like ice quirks, fire. People with fire quirks, water. You know what I mean? Like, he basically figured out the ins and outs of most quirks that most people will have in his classroom. When he's in school, he and Bakugo study and stuff like that, and one day they'd be in Deku's house playing video games when suddenly, Deku would say, "Hey Bakugo, you mind going outside and getting us some ice cream?" And Bakugo would say, "Nah bro, I won the last fight, you gotta go get it." And Deku would be like, "Come on dude, I had the weakest quirk ever." And Bakugo would say, "Too bad, that's why I told you to train your body. Not my fault that you haven't been training hard enough." Izuku grits his teeth, and for the following 2 months left of the training, Izuku would train even harder than ever before, getting way past the levels of Stain when it comes to just his normal human intent. He also has the ability of Bloodlust, which he can use to pretty much catch people off guard, and he can also has the ability to, just be a very experienced and calm and collected fighter. The entrance exam day would finally come around the corner, and on this particular day, Izuku would wake up with a powerful wind quirk, which would let him completely obliterate all of the robots in the physical portion of the exam. And as for the mental portion, aka the written exam, Izuku would pass with flying colors. Like I said, he obliterates robots, and he would ultimately be the one responsible for saving Uraraka, using a massive gust of wind to blow the 0-pointer and make it topple over, and then ultimately using his wind quirk to shoot the rocks off of Uraraka, picking her up and taking her to Recovery Girl. Izuku would shock all of the people there, and Uraraka would think that his quirk was awesome. And then suddenly, we would have 1 week go by in which Deku would switch between one quirk and another quirk and another quirk, and eventually Deku would get his acceptance letter. 2 days later, Monday would arrive, and Izuku would wake up getting ready and change for school. When Deku's doing this, he would wake up and see a massive breakfast that his mom would have made him for his first day of school, and Deku, an iconic anime character, movie character, series character, everything fashion, bro grabs a piece of toast and literally runs out of the door. Imagine the disrespect. But anyways, he does so, and then he would meet Bakugo outside. They catch the train and they make their way towards UA. Once there, he and Bakugo would go towards their desks, and Bakugo puts his feet on top of the table as Deku would sit right next to Bakugo at the front, and then suddenly Ida walks over and would be like, "Hey, get your feet off those desks. Do you not know that multiple UA students will use these desks, and very powerful heroes before us have used these before? Don't disrespect the property." And Bakugo would say, "Kid, who put a stick up your ass? Stop being so uptight." Ida would be like, "Why, I never." And he'd be like, "I never thought that somebody would speak to me in such a manner." And Bakugo would say, "Yeah, well, it looks like somebody finally did. Now get lost, kid, before I blow you to smithereens." And Deku would look towards Ida and say, "Hey, just leave him alone. He has this kind of personality. Trust me, he's not doing it to be disrespectful." And Ida would be like, "Well, I can't allow this to happen in front of me." And Deku would be like, "Dude, just go sit down. Like, you're bothering me as well. Like, I'm pretty sure nobody cares." Suddenly, Aizawa would wake up in a sleeping bag, and Uraraka would go right over towards the direction of Deku, as, Deku would see Uraraka, and she would thank Izuku for saving him. Mid-thanking though, Aizawa wakes up and he'd be like, "Alright, put these on and meet me outside." Uraraka interrupts, being like, "But what about orientation?" And ultimately he would tell them that's irrelevant, that they have 3 years to train, and that he's not going to be wasting it telling them how great they are for getting into a school. That's the easy part. Now comes the hard part. So they go train and they go towards the fitting rooms, or no, not fitting rooms, but changing rooms. And once there, they end up changing their outfits into the UA school uniforms and making their way towards the outside, the UA gym uniforms, by the way. And then they go outside and they get prepared to take on the test. Izuku would have been the one who scored the highest amount of points, even over Bakugo slightly, just due to the fact that he saved Uraraka. So that would have ended up helping Izuku get 22 more points than Bakugo, so he ends up stomping his score. However, once Izuku would have the ball tossed to him, Aizawa would tell him not to hold back, and Deku would close his eyes, grip the ball as hard as he can, and Aizawa, like, let me tell you, Aizawa's expecting this thing to go into like space or something. Like, he's like, this kid with the wind quirk, I better keep an eye on him. He seems like a very powerful student. Izuku grabs the ball and tosses it and gets not too impressive markings. Like, he gets like what was Bakugo's meters, like 70 something meters, so he gets like 200 something meters, and Aizawa would be like, I said use your quirk, and Deku would say, problem with that, Teach, is that I don't have a quirk today, really. And Aizawa would be like, what are you talking about? I told you to go all out. And then Izuku would say, you didn't read my file? And Aizawa would say, what are you talking about? Deku would then have a bunch of people looking at him who were like, I thought you had a wind quirk. And then Uraraka would be like, yeah, use your power. And Deku would say, I had a wind quirk, but every day, how do I explain this? Every day I wake up with a new quirk. Some days I might have a powerful one, some days I might have a weak one. My quirk is random. It's almost like a quirk generator. And by the way, that's what I'm using to make up these random quirks. And so today he says that his quirk was to put on anything he touches as soon as he touches it. And people would be like, but isn't that just super speed? Like, you're quickly putting it on? And Deku's like, not quite. I mean, give me that cup. And Izuku puts on the cup, but he's like, fashion, you know what I mean? And obviously I got that shtick from Caleb City, you know, absolutely love that guy. But anyways, though, from here, Izuku then would look at them and would say not to worry about him, that he's trained his body so much to the point where he can definitely keep up with quirked people with or without a powerful quirk. So the following portions of the rest of the exams would go, and Izuku would be in the top 5 leaderboard for how he did with the tests. Izuku would have actually blown everybody out of the water with how powerful he is, even without a powerful quirk, and this would let people know, okay, don't mess with him. He's clearly a lot stronger than you would think. I mean, obviously he is. Look at Deku. Bro's ripped. He literally looks exactly like what he looks like in the thumbnail. And just to let you guys know, Izuku has like blue hair, he has like these cool looking red eyes, and his like pro hero outfit is going to be exactly like what you guys see in the thumbnail, like just a really cool black and white looking outfit that's just going to be like just fire, just know. But anyways, though, doing this, what Izuku would do is basically wake up the random, not wake up the random, but wake up the next 2 days, and because he doesn't end up getting expelled, the person who does get expelled would be Hagakure. Why? Because I love Mineta. And like, let's be honest, all she could do is turn invisible, or not even turn invisible, all she does is be invisible. So I don't think that would really help her with much of the portions. I mean, at least Mineta ended up getting that one good score with the ball, with the side-to-side thing, right? So it just makes more sense for her to get expelled, since she's not even comic relief, she's just kind of a useless character. But anyways, though, for the following 2 days, they go to school and have normal academic-like days. And for those 2 days, Izuku would have access to a slime quirk, which would remind him a lot of the sludge villain, and the next day he would have a squid quirk. But the third day, which is going to actually be the day of the heroes versus villains day, where All Might busts into the classroom and he'd be like, I am here. Bro wakes up with a white flame quirk, which would actually be really, really, really awesome. And for this particular day, All Might walks in, you know, he introduces himself to the class and everybody's just loving it. You know what I mean? Your favorite hero walks in. And by the way, I have a question, guys. Are you guys watching the NBA finals? I know that, or no, not finals, but the playoffs, they're pretty good right now. I mean, LeBron versus Curry, it's going crazy. Sorry for my tangent, but I just had to ask. If you are, comment it down below. Anyways, though, so continuing on with the story, Izuku, like I said, he has a white flame quirk, and it's actually very, very potent. On this particular day, Izuku would actually end up being going outside. He puts on his pro hero outfit, and bro is just looking immaculate. I'm talking the girls in UA look at him and they're like, ooh, let me get a piece of that. But we already know my boy Izuku ain't finna get shipped with nobody here. I don't really feel like doing a ship for this story, so we're not gonna do that. And instead, I'm gonna be saying that Izuku would end up getting paired up with Mineta, because like, why not? So he gets paired up with Mineta, and he and Mineta are both tasked with facing off against Ida and Bakugo. Bakugo would smirk, saying that that Izuku is going to be having a blast facing off against him. And Bakugo would be like, don't get too cocky, Deku. Today, I'm going to show everybody who the real alpha dog is here. And Deku would say, I wouldn't count on it, Bakugo. And Bakugo would say, so what does that mean? Did you wake up with a powerful quirk? And Deku would say, maybe, maybe not. You'll have to wait and see. And Bakugo would say, whatever, Deku. I'm gonna crush you, alright? Don't take it the hard way. And Deku would laugh before then making his way towards Mineta, and Mineta would be like, so did you wake up with a strong quirk today? And Deku would be like, yeah, I have a white flame quirk. Also, you're weird. Can you stay away from me? And Mineta would be like, sorry. Before he then, jumps away and he like gets away from Izuku, and Izuku would just wait for the starting, whistle to go off, and then ultimately Izuku just makes his way towards the building. Izuku, knowing how Bakugo is, Bakugo comes in and he'd be like, Deku, come out and fight me. And Deku would be like, I'm down here. And ultimately Bakugo ends up arriving in the hallway, and Deku would say, look, Bakugo, you don't want the smoke today, trust me. And Bakugo would say, trust me, I do. Before shooting a powerful explosion at Deku, the size of literally the explosion that would come out of his gauntlets, and Deku using his white flames, he would shoot it at Bakugo. Bakugo hides behind one of the pillars that would be there, and he realizes that Deku most definitely woke up with a powerful quirk. Those flames are so hot he could feel them even though he was hiding behind something. And Deku looks towards Bakugo before saying, doesn't look like you're too happy now. Deku says, how about we take this outside, considering that nothing good can happen from us using our quirks like crazy in here. Bakugo would say, couldn't agree more. And so he tackles Deku out of the third floor window, and Deku using his flame quirks would shoot it to propel himself up so he doesn't crash, Bakugo doing the same thing, and then both Deku using his flames quirk to fly and Bakugo doing the same with his explosions would then immediately start going at it. Fists clashing and Deku shooting flames, Bakugo shooting explosions, and Bakugo using his knowledge of facing off against different quirks and opponents and adversaries would do his absolute best to fight off against Deku. However, Deku having the ability of flames and having fought Bakugo his whole life, he kind of knows what Bakugo will think. So the fact that Deku does have an OP quirk today, he knows how Bakugo will fight, he's pretty much a master at up close martial arts combat, and this isn't a challenge of who can beat the other person, but who can restrain the other. Deku would come up with a very, very slick idea of using the capture tape to beat Bakugo and not really having to truly defeat him. So Deku shoots a blinding gust of flames at the direction of Bakugo, and Bakugo, he has to tank the attack and it burns him. But as that's happening, Deku creates flame wings, flies towards Bakugo, uses the capture tape and wraps it around him, barely closing it. And Bakugo would be like, but then he realizes that he got captured with the tape, and Bakugo would be like, damn it, as Deku looks at him and says, it sucks to suck, Bakugo, but I won today. And Bakugo would be like, yeah, well, tomorrow when you don't have a strong quirk, we'll see about that. And Deku would say, I doubt it, as he runs off towards Ida and absolutely curb stomps him. Then he would make his way towards the examination room, and Momo would say that Izuku was clearly the MVP. That Mineta doesn't even deserve a passing grade. He literally did nothing but hide and ride Izuku's coattails, so he doesn't deserve any points. And All Might couldn't agree more, so Mineta would get a 0 and everybody else would do absolutely great. All of this portion would go just like you guys would probably be expecting, and it is now where we will jump to the next day and find out what quirk Izuku has today. Izuku wakes up the very next day, and it would be here that Izuku would be like, I can't wait to see what quirk I'm gonna get today. Izuku, from here, he would be like, alright, let's see if it's some sort of strange quirk. And it would be at this moment that Izuku would be like, huh? What's this? And he realizes he just shot clouds out of his hands. Izuku would think, sweet, looks like today I'm gonna have the ability of shooting clouds, or at least controlling them some sort. And so Izuku would get his stuff and be ready for his next day at school. Izuku arrives, and once there, they would end up having their usual hero training activities, which Izuku would be, monitored by Aizawa, who would be there today and not All Might. And during this day, Izuku would be facing off against, let's say Ojiro, because why not? Ojiro rushes in at Deku, and Deku dodges out of the way, jumping and then using a little thing of cloud to form a barrier between he and Ojiro. However, right as that happens, Aizawa's eyes widened and he would stop the fight, immediately going towards Deku with a serious expression and asking him like what that quirk feels like. And Deku would say, it's cool, honestly, but that's really all I can say. And Aizawa would say, Sorry, I didn't mean to stop the fight. He commences it, and from here, All Might comes in the classroom taking over, because Aizawa just got hit with a little bit of PTSD, remembering one of his good childhood friends, Shirakumo, and Izuku would wonder what was wrong with his teacher, but he doesn't know. Eventually, we time skip to the day of the USJ incident, and it would be on this day that Izuku would wake up with an overpowered gravity quirk.